Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the studio channel. We are now talking about the S2000. If you haven't seen the video yet, I've posted it up here, so check it out, the full length one, but I wanted to take a deep dive, more of a detailing nerd version. We try to do a one take here of both of these fenders. Now you can see that there's this white discoloration on both sides. What's weird is it's right along the axle. Now I talked to the owner and he said that when I guess it's the new owner, but the previous owner put a tarp or some sort of cover on here for X amount of years, and then it blew off. But apparently I think it was still caught somewhere here. So like most of it was up maybe on the windshield and then flapped over this way and was hitting it going into the wind because the trunk area was incredibly bad. And so when I talked to the new owner, the guy that just dropped this off, he said that, oh, it wasn't fully covered, so on and so forth. So all the way around the back is really embedded with tons and tons of junk, which is, if I was an investigator or whatever, I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That wasn't covered. And this was a little bit cleaner in terms of the edges. But this area here had a tarp on it. So we'll come back to that in a second. So what I did within the main video, if you haven't watched that, I talk about a little brief version of what we're going to expand on here. And of course, I'm going to do some whiteboard stuff. But I called Kevin in that episode and I asked him. All right, Kevin, thanks for hopping on real quick. I sent you a bunch of pictures of the S2000 of the damage on both sides. What do you think? Because when I rub it with my hand, it's very smooth. It's perfectly fine. It looks, shiny from the angle, but if you look down on it, you can clearly see as if somebody, the best way I can describe it is if I took a needle, hypothetical needle, and just like jammed it a little bit into the paint and then like squirted white or clear paint underneath the paint. That's kind of what it feels like. It's not something that I can sand or polish or clay bar or whatever.
So you already buffed it, and does the texture look the same there as the rest of the paint? In other words, sometimes that happens when somebody over buffs an area.
Right.
So does it look like it's got the orange peel natural texture like the rest of the panel?
It looks just like everything else. It looks just like everything else.
As far as you know, it's never been repainted?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm zooming in on this, and you got the driver's side fender,
and it's equal across the axle, if you will, from tire to tire. It's like in the exact same spot on both sides, which is a little bit suspicious as well.
Well, I wonder if that was ever covered.
Yeah.
And
yep, that's what the owner told me. So there, yes, it was sitting outside. There was some type of cover on it. I don't know if it's like a quality cover or whatever, but when he arrived, years later, he bought it a couple of weeks ago, but the thing's been sitting outside. He said when he arrived, it had been sitting outside for years, and he saw that the cover was off, but like half on and half off. And I noticed that when I was working on the back of the car was way worse than the front of the car. You get what I'm saying? So like half of it was probably half on, half off, whatever.
Yeah, well, if you could imagine that there is a cover there or a tarp, and then if it's outside, obviously it sounds like it was, then over time there's some moisture that can get trapped between the cover, or let's say it just stays wet, right? It either permeates or goes through the cover and gets between the cover and the top of the paint, the clear paint. So now you've got potentially moisture trapped. And then with the expansion and contraction that normally happens with everything on the earth, just about, especially with these automotive paint, as it expands and contracts and it's porous, it could absorb some water through the clear microscopically. And over time, if that stays trapped in there, that could cause a delamination, especially if it was the kind of cover or a tarp that suctioned down against the clear, like imagine a vacuum from just sitting there and expanding, contracting, and maybe it's even got bungee cords on it or something like that, and it's really stuck to the top portion of the clear coat paint, so the tarp doesn't really allow the clear to move, but the substrate does. The primer and the base coat, they can move, but not in tandem because the clear coat's being held still by the tarp on the top through friction, right? So that stays still more so than the rest of the panel and paint structure. And over time, it causes delamination. And I was looking at these squiggly lines. You've polished this, but if you look closely, you can see white lines, which are probably the shape of a water spot. And I don't know if the minerals can permeate or go through that clear coat, because that would be very microscopic. But I mean, nobody says it's a filter, right? So you could have water with mineral deposits coming through that clear like a fog, and then as it evaporated, it left behind minerals, because there's mineral trace underneath the clear coat. And you could, if you look really close, I'm seeing some big squiggly lines. It looks like string marks, not in the big dull area on the driver's side, but below it. And those look like little strings stuck underneath, but they're not. They're very likely mineral. So I would say, yeah, you've got clear coat delamination caused by moisture absorption and the inability for the clear coat to move in tandem with the base coat, the primer, the substrate, all that. So yeah,
that
interesting.
happens a lot, because like I think it's difficult. I mean, I know you and I have talked about it, so that's the only reason why I would know about it. But I feel like the normal, even the everyday detailer, that's an insane concept to think that the top layer is perfectly fine. It's smooth. It feels. If that blemish wasn't there, I would never know in a million years. But you're saying underneath the clear coat, just like in the ATA 200 when we talked about that they're moving independently, and that's what's going on. It's like creating this friction between the bottom of the clear coat and the top of the base coat. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, that's where your fogginess, your permanent fogginess is coming from, is you've got a grinding action on the underside of the clear coat against the base. And it's powder. It's causing it to powder, right, essentially. So you've got this. That's what that fogginess is. There's no water left. I mean, I've been in situations, even with Jason Rose, where we've had people at trainings say, hey, there was a rainstorm and I've got magnet signs on my door, and I pulled the magnet off, but there is moisture in the shape of the magnet. How do I get it out? Well, you get it out by expanding the paint with heat lamps, gradually, and let that stuff open up and stretch and let the water get out. You can even buff to help twist and flex and create some more heat to cause that water to evaporate. And it doesn't cause permanent damage like this. It doesn't cause delamination. It's just moisture absorption. In this case, there was, time and time again, repeated action of heating and cooling under the tarp, maybe steaming it, or it's hot on top.
It was North Carolina, by the way, so it was going to be hot. So that's the point.
Yeah, that's a very rare thing. But the fact is, how do you figure that out? Well, it's on the left side and the right side. The orange peel or the texture of the paint is consistent with the rest of the car. Then you validate, well, it was covered. And so, yeah, it looks like that kind of thing. So the only thing you can do with that is it's a repaint, or somebody's really good at touching up. But if it's delammed, then you need to strip it down, right?
Okay, so the bottom line is, because what I was going to tell the customers, listen, it's shiny, it looks great, but as soon as you get within a couple of feet of it, you can definitely see it, but there's nothing from a detailing perspective that I can do other than recommend that you go to a body shop and have them repainted. Is that fair?
Yeah, because even if it's an expensive car or a rare car that has a high value, it's already been devalued. By repainting those two little fenders, it's not devaluing it. It's already damaged and destroyed. Even if you called it the same degradation of the value by repainting, it still looks better. It's already devalued, right? So it makes sense. Yeah, it's a 1 in a million that would happen too. It'd have to be everything just right, enough heat and cooling and covered there, but not the rest of the car. And the cover probably suctioned down or didn't move very easily, so it just stayed in place and held the clear coat in place through friction between the tarp or cover and that. It's just all kinds of weird stuff that had to happen to make that thing. I don't think somebody's going to come across that in their detailing life for decades, if at all, ever. But it is nice to think of those things that can happen. Even the same thing could have occurred if somebody put duct tape on it, or gaffer's tape, or some kind of tape there and left it. The tape would control the expansion and contraction of the clear coat, and if water got through the tape and through that, you'd have the same kind of holding effect. So I think that definitely humidity and extreme heat could play a part for sure.
You know what? You just reminded me. I did an Alfa Romeo Giulio years ago, Quattrofolio. The guy was so excited to have it detailed that he bought it in somewhere south, Delaware, make it up, whatever. And he drove 5-6 hours up here, and the way that he protected it was he put masking tape all over the car. And then when I went to go peel it off, it was a total nightmare. Like, it was way worse.
You called me on that. We actually had a discussion about that very car.
Right.
The tape was applied to the vehicle to transport it. And it sounds like you used a pretty strong tape. And the thing about tape is, it has an ability to restrict or limit expansion and contraction of a paint surface. So if it's very strong tape, it's going to limit it more so than one that's twisty and soft and flexible. So in this case, you've got carbon fiber, you've got composite bumper, you've got very strong tape, and it makes sense that the tape restricted the ability for the paint to expand and contract without restriction. So it imprinted it.
So I'm thinking it's the same kind of concept going on there, maybe.
Except for, there's room for water to slip and stay in there between the tarp and the clear. And then if it's suctioned down or just steamed it, I mean, could you imagine if the cover was dark and the sun hits that dark cover? Let's say a tarp. You can imagine the heat right there on the tarp where it hits the fender, and there's moisture there. Yeah, you got tremendous heating. 180 degrees under steam, it could be incredible.
Yeah, it's just wild to think about it. But all right, well, listen, thank you for chatting about that. I just wanted to kind of pick your brain and share that with everybody. So thank you. Hope you're doing well.
I am. Okay, chat with you later.
All right, talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Normal paint. We're going to assume for a minute that there's E-coat on there. I'm not necessarily sure, to be honest with you. If you guys know, this is a 2001. I would imagine they had some type of E-coat at the factory, but I'm not 100% sure. I know the newer cars have that. But substrate, metal, carbon fiber, so on, aluminum, etc. So the metal here, the E-coat, the primer, which is much thicker, the color, in this case silver, red, blue, whatever, but in this case silver, and then of course the clear, which is even thicker. Usually the color coat's a little bit thinner than the primer, and the clear is a little bit bigger than the primer, typically speaking. Now if we go over to the S2000, we start at the bottom, substrate, E-coat. I don't know if that's actually true, but let's just pretend it's true there. The primer, then the color. Now here's what's going on with this car, the color or the base. There is this pocket right here that we are seeing right there. So we believe that because the tarp was hanging over and kind of probably strapped to the tires and then probably flapped over that way or that way, it doesn't matter, but it was kind of and going back and forth and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, it basically got a bunch of moisture underneath the tarp right there, and then created this little gap, this space between the color and the clear. So that moisture got in there, and then with the cover on top of it, it kind of steamed it up. This is North Carolina, so it probably got really hot, so it's steaming and steaming and steaming. And then the clear started to separate and grind. We have grinding up here with the tarp going on here, and now this is shifting and moving, and this might have been staying, still stuck to the actual primer. And now you have this shifting. If I had another hand, I'd have one hand going this way, one hand going that way, and created this little pocket. Because to me, it's a little suspicious that this is here over the axle, and you go directly over, and bang. You have another one that's super bright over here with this light. These are this is behind the scenes, so these are one of the big lights that I use. But you can see there's white right there, there's a little white right here, there's some extra blotchiness that I'm not 100% sure is going on. So we think there's some other things, but Kevin and I were talking about. But for the most part, right here, straight over, bang, there's one here, there's a couple of them up here. So I think this thing was sitting over there and basically just boiled the paint, and then that movement between the two of them. So long and short of it is, if you see something like this, this is the definition of a repaint. Because listen, watch my hand here, or listen to my hand. Nothing. It's perfectly clear. It's actually shiny. So I polished the clear on top of it, but I can't access that. So as a detailer, you, one, have to make sure that when you inspect the car, you take a look at that and say, there's nothing I can do, sir or ma'am. You're going to have to get it repainted. I can take the edge off it, make it shiny or whatever, but there's nothing you can do. And then, if you want to get super nerdy, you can make a little chart for them and say like, this is how the paint actually, looks, et cetera, but there's really just this grinding action because these, as we talked about in the ATA 300 and 200, quite frankly, these move independently based on the temperature, heating up and cooling down. So anyway, so that's the hardcore nerd version that I couldn't put in the bigger video, but I know you guys on the studio channel want to know really what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, so this came out very, very good. I wouldn't call it perfect because there's a lot of imperfections in the paint that I couldn't go any further on because one, the paint, see, look, some imperfections there. So this is one of those moments where you have to say when. And but overall, it looks fantastic. I pulled both of these seats out again. You probably watched the bigger video. Really simple. That one was the only one that had a wire in it. This had no electrical power at all, so simple to pull out. But you have to keep in mind, you have little things like this. Things are broken here and there. There was some glue I didn't show in the episode because this is a last minute thing. He just told me there was glue here there was glue here. So something, maybe like a windage tray for these guys was glued in, and he took it out and didn't want it anymore. And so you have to be super careful with this because I used rapid remover and a little bit of a razor blade. And so I took most of it. It was really kind of sticking out. So it's very smooth now, but you can see there's a little, I didn't go too much further because we're talking crazy glue on there on plastic. It's very hard to get that out. But yeah, so anyways, that's a little bit of the behind the scenes. We're going to be hopefully doing a lot more of these studio channel videos where it's just a one take and kind of going over the deep dive nerdy stuff, because I know in the big channel, you know, we can't do 20 minutes because people start, this is too much talking and that kind of thing. But I know you guys are super into detailing, so thank you again, much appreciated. Any questions at all, reach out to me, shoot me an email, or leave a comment below, etc. Have a great night. I've been on this car for almost 3 days and I got here super early, so it is now time to go home and eat some dinner. Talk to you guys. All right, be well.